Yes, friends. It is OGP, the One Giant Podcast on a Monday night tilt. By the way, in case you're wondering, as we're coming in here, I'll reiterate what I was just saying because I was on mute for the introduction of the live session over on YouTube, obviously live streaming here ahead of that Monday night tilt. New York Football Giants hosting division rival Dallas Cowboys, whiteout 3-0 on the line. So much that we're going to want to talk about here. Shout out to Izzy. Shout out to Dr. Pancake. Shout out to Tommy. Everybody in as we just get the ball rolling here on the live stream. We're going to have some fun. Shout out where you're at there. Saw some good already kind of just conversations around what to predict for this game. We got some low scoring operations like 17-10 Giants. We've got some that say the offense starts to roll 31-21. Either way, though, so far, early polling suggests that the New York Football Giants fan base wants to see a big blue victory tonight. And we're going to get into all of that. What I was saying at the top to myself, apparently, and Andy's going to be in here, by the way. My cohort will be in for the conversation shortly, but it's a long one. So we recorded last Wednesday. I came in on Thursday with the conversation around Kenny Golladay. We'll discuss how his week of practice went and what that can mean for the New York Football Giants in this game. And then we had a long weekend, right? Thursday night football, full slate of games over Sunday. And then obviously we come in for what closes out week number 3 with the New York Football Giants. Izzy, shout out. Down here in South Texas, Cowboy country. So we need this win. Oof, Izzy. Behind enemy lines, as we like to say. But there were a lot of games that went on. And I think one thing that I was talking about with a couple of people around NFL discussions in general is so much of this early part of the season, not to take away from what the Giants are accomplishing. You always listen, going to look on the bright side. Once the final whistle blows, the wins count as wins. They never take them away. And the Giants have a lot of things in front of them, which we'll discuss in this episode. But there's a lot of feeling out early here. And we know when you look around the league and we have these discussions around who's looking sharp out of the gates, who maybe struggled in week 1 and then had to find a way to bounce back, and who have maybe dug themselves holes that are going to be pretty hard to get out of. Like that's a big narrative around the start of this NFL season, of course, and that extended the preseason, got it watered down even more. It's only 3 games and barely any reps. And when you look around the league right now, there's a lot of teams that were kind of as heavily into the we're not doing too much in the preseason, we're doing the bare bones minimum, that maybe struggled a little bit out of the gates. And just to put it into context, as we just think about some of those big games before we dive fully in on the Giants, and I know some people will say, hey, listen, you're here for the Giants content. I get that. But think about the Tennessee Titans, a team that the New York Football Giants took down in week 1. All of a sudden, after week number 3, right, they managed to at least put a good foot forward here and get themselves their first win of the season over the Raiders. The Raiders that they beat are also a team that is now 0-3 and doesn't look like they resemble anything based on expectations coming out of last year, bringing in McDaniels, pairing Devontae Adams with college friend and quarterback Derek Carr. It's just not happening for them now. So, and the Bills in the same weekend prior, absolutely blew out the Titans. So we always think about these comparative things. The wins and losses stay with the Giants. It doesn't matter after the week is done. And yet we can start to contextualize a little bit around what it meant to beat the Tennessee Titans in week 1, watch them get absolutely pummeled in week 2. And then, they beat the Raiders. And in theory, you'd be saying, oh, they beat the Raiders, but it doesn't mean as much now because the Raiders aren't winning any games. So we'll see how things flesh themselves out. Team like the Colts, and I only mention it because I was having a conversation with a couple of Colts guys that cover the team, and them beating the Kansas City Chiefs or the Arizona Cardinals. Just as one lap around the NFL here before Andy gets in and we really go full tilt. When you think about these teams that get wins like the Colts, who pick up a big win, and yet because they came off of 1-1-1 to start their season, having beaten the Chiefs this game, absolutely embarrassed by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then came out with that tie in week 1 against the Houston Texans. So again, then you're like, oh my God, if you're a Colts fan, what's going wrong here? New quarterback, obviously veteran in Matt Ryan. You think you're all systems go. The line is struggling a little bit. But now when you reflect back on it, even though Justin Herbert was a little bit dinged up following the prior game against the Chiefs where they lost. The Chargers come in, you take them on, you get the win if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, and everything that you're trying to sort out here in terms of the landscape of the NFL and where teams stack up. It's a week-to-week reevaluation. And that's where I think we start to think about the New York Football Giants and understanding what is at stake in this game. We'll see if Andy has any thoughts around just the general NFL landscape before we tap into this Monday night matchup, the New York Football Giants, and how important this game could be. And Andy, as I welcome you in, good sir, banner hanging in the background. I know that you said you got one for me, but I don't see it hanging behind me here. So I'm just wondering, checking the mail, waiting.
I mean, it's sitting over on the bed right over here. I'll make sure to figure out a way to get it over to you,
Just saying.
obviously.
Just saying. I was taking a quick lap around the NFL before we talk about New York Football Giants. I mentioned I was just talking about the Colts beating the Chiefs, talking about the Bills, right? They fall there. The Dolphins continue to roll here. Anything off of the weekend, since this is our first Monday night game for the Giants and every other game has been played. Did anything else jump out to you over the weekend? Because I this sense of like every week you got to reset yourself with what it means, because wins and losses get compartmentalized based on what those teams do in week 2, in week 3, and going forward.
Yeah, so a couple quick thoughts that entered my mind as I was watching the games yesterday. The first one is it doesn't feel like there is a prohibitive favorite, like there usually is. Every year you kind of thought it was the Chiefs or Tom Brady and the Bucks. It kind of feels like there's a lot more parity in the league right now than ever before. You look at teams like Kansas City, as you mentioned, losing. The Buccaneers Packers game was almost unwatchable. Like, I was thinking about turning the channel. It was decimated with injuries for both those teams.
Yeah.
Obviously, the one big takeaway is that Philadelphia looks really good. It looks like Jalen Hurts is taking the next step, and he is ascending to a place that I don't know if a lot of people thought he could get to, Adam. He is now, we know he's a dual threat quarterback. We know that he can use his legs as a weapon. But if he's accurate and he's throwing the ball deep and making explosive plays happen, the Philadelphia Eagles might be the team to beat in the NFC overall, just knowing they have so much firepower now and can hurt you in a host of different ways.
No, for sure. I think, it's like when the Bengals losing, right? They beat the Jets this weekend, but them being 1-2, the Chargers losing, right? And they have their issues with Herbert just being dinged up. There's a lot of teams out there that were considered to be at the upper echelon. It doesn't mean they won't be there by the end of the year, but at least over these first 3 weeks, you look and you go, there's other teams involved here. We thought the Dolphins would be better. And even off their big win the week prior against Baltimore, it was like, yeah, okay, but you had to come back. You were down massive. So let's see if you can. Oops, you just repeated it, right? And you did it against a team like the Buffalo Bills, a prohibitive favorite. So I think you're right. It certainly is more wide open in this moment than it necessarily feels in the big picture. Another guy that I'll mention, you tell me when you want this. I came across a philosophical question in my mind when we talked about, I had said, evaluating the Giants, give me the first 3 games. Let me see what Daniel Jones does. I have a question around Daniel Jones and this team that I want to get to, but we can get to it when you think it's right. But I will just throw in Kyler Murray when you mentioned Jalen Hurts, another quarterback of that ilk, along with Lamar Jackson, who these are all guys. I don't understand why people still doubt Lamar Jackson, but he seems to have figured out this idea. If you know what I'm going to do is just remind you that I can have an even better season than when I was the MVP.
I mean,
but there's a lot of quarterbacks that are in that same vein. Daniel Jones could be considered among them, all at different levels, but have a lot to confirm or deny this year.
Yeah, so Lamar Jackson on pace for over 5,000 yards and 60 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He's I think he accounts for 87% of his team. It's mind-boggling how this guy bet on himself, and he is going to get paid handsomely as a result.
Yeah.
Adam, the one thing I was thinking about as I watched all those games, we talked about parity, is that there is a lot of just mediocre quarterback play in the NFL. Like, that was something that I didn't think I was going to say that going in. And you look at Derek Carr, right? Like,
I was talking about him being on the losing end of that good game, but a bounce back game there, but not for the 0-3. 0-3.
They're 0-3. Derek Carr and that offense looked terrible. You look at the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins did not look great. Like, he's and these are all guys that are like in that, I don't know, 12 to 15, 12 to 18 range in terms of the type of quarterback that you pay a bunch of money to. But this is the problem, Adam, is like if Kirk Cousins is making $40 million and Derek Carr's making $40 million and they're not a force multiplier, then you're really setting your team back and you feel hamstrung because you kind of sit there and you're like, all right, we can get to 8 wins. We can be around 500 and hopefully sneak into the playoffs. Is that the goal, though? Like, is that what you want to end up doing? Because look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They had Carson Wentz. They realized, like, we can meddle around being 500. Let's trade him away. Let's go with the guys that have higher upside at him. And now all of a sudden, Jalen Hurts is taking this team to a different level, I think.
Okay, so then let's have this philosophical question on Daniel Jones because it ties into it, right? Because we know that he's coming into this final year, no fifth-year option. So all of these guys that are playing, like you said, average football at the quarterback position, well, it still stands to reason that the price tag for Daniel Jones is going to be as high as it ever could be because, hey, guess what? Even average play costs you $30+ million at the particular position. But the thing that I wondered was, and I'm not contextualizing about how I feel about Daniel Jones. I'm gonna get this through this third game. Everyone, we've had the discussion. I don't think that he's blown anyone away over the first 2 weeks. Doesn't mean it can't continue to get better. There's a lot going on with this team. However, if the Giants were to win this game against the Dallas Cowboys and be 3-0, while historically there are teams that start out 3-0 and have missed the playoffs, it would put them as much in the driver's seat to make the playoffs as any team in the NFC. If Daniel Jones plays average again, I never thought that we never painted this scenario of what happens if the team is winning games, but Daniel Jones is not one of the main reasons why they're winning those games. Do you think that there's a world where the Giants would go to Tyrod Taylor in the vein of, oh, we didn't think that these two things could be happening at the same time. We didn't think we could both be winning and have Daniel Jones not necessarily be an elite level quarterback for us. And now Brian Daboll and the coaches says, hey, like we can really, who knows what we can make some noise here. Maybe we can win a playoff game. Daniel Jones inherently has more upside, we think, on paper. But if he's not showing it through 3 weeks, through 4 weeks, through 5 weeks, where's the cutoff when maybe this team, you look back and they're sitting there 5-2, 7 games through the season, and it hasn't been because of Daniel Jones? I know it's hard to take a quarterback out when the team's winning games, but do you think that question can exist? That's my curiosity.
Well, it certainly exists for you, Adam, because you are a Daniel Jones hater. Everyone that listens to the show knows that you want him to fail. You want him to fail so much in spite of your allegiance and loyalty to the New York Giants. So I understand that question will exist, out in the ether. I think the simple answer is Daniel Jones had put up a bunch of good stats, but they potentially lose a couple games. You'd be like, oh, the team needs to get better. If the team is winning, Daniel Jones will continue to be the quarterback here. There's no upside. There's no upside to bring in Tyrod Taylor in because you know what Tyrod Taylor is. You fully understand. You've seen it there before. It's another one of those guys that can get you to 500. You could potentially sneak into the playoffs and maybe make a win. The whole idea is you're looking for the guy that's going to be the force multiplier. And if Daniel Jones can do that,
I'm saying, but if Daniel Jones doesn't show it, then why would you assume that he can? Like that's all my point is. I know you're being tongue in cheek about how I hate Daniel Jones. My point is, like, how many games do you go where Daniel Jones is throwing for 175 to 210 yards and the team is winning ball games, but it's not necessarily because of him? And the entertainer had said over on Twitter about, like, I hate this idea of winning in spite of the quarterback. And I agree with that. Like, the Giants are not winning in spite of Daniel Jones in the first 2 games. And they're not going to maybe win this game against Dallas in spite of Daniel Jones. He's contributing to the winning process. It's just a matter of, like, can there be a point when the Giants say, oh, the idea of what Daniel Jones could be, we've now learned it. We have identified the ceiling. That's my point, is, like, can you come to a point in this season where you say, we know what the ceiling is now for Daniel Jones? And it turns out it's not as, ambiguously above Tyrod Taylor's ceiling. And ultimately the big statement of, we know we're not going to go forward with him beyond this year. Like, that has to be coming here at some point in the season, keeping him or not keeping him. The Giants are going to know that well before the end of the year, right?
I agree with that. Here's the thing, though. We're not even in the same spectrum of whether or not you would ever bench Daniel Jones. I obviously feel more confident in his abilities than sometimes I think you feel. The interesting thing, Adam, is we're having this debate and we're having this thought. Daniel Jones is completing 70% of his passes. He's got a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
He
His
completed
pass
80% of his passes in week 1, and then by having more passes in week 2, he completed closer to 60%. So I'm not even, by the way,
but
I,
Adam,
I want to
don't
be
be
clear.
disingenuous because he's 64.7% against the Panthers, 81%. That
Right.
averages out to 70.9%. Even 65% completion percentage for Daniel Jones would be great. And
But by the way, though, and I just want to make it clear, I'm not saying that I'm out that Tyrod Taylor should start tonight's game, right? And that Tyrod Taylor should start week 4. Like I'm not even close to that. This is about getting enough of a sample size to feel confident about it. And while I often push back on when fans say, well, the offensive line or well, this or the weapons, like I think there has to be a line in the sand when you just say, yeah, and then I just need listen, you can watch certain plays and see things that Jones does well and see things where he struggles. I think I know what you're saying. Nothing about the first 2 games makes me go, oh, Jesus, Daniel Jones, nor does it make me say, okay, Daniel Jones, right? Like when you say 70% completion percentage, I step back and go, yes. However, when you go and watch those games, there's a clear understanding of the limit that they're putting on the offensive game plan, and that can be a both end. We heard Sterling Shepard say, we're not all fully up to speed here with this system, right? The offensive line play is having struggles. So again, this isn't a solely why isn't Daniel Jones gripping and ripping it? It's just the sample size tells me his stats are going to look like what Geno Smith has looked like to start the year for Seattle, right? They're going to look a little bit stronger in certain categories because it's designed to be successful in a certain vein. And that's okay.
I fully appreciate that. Just keep in mind, Daniel Jones is 7th in the league in passer rating at 99.4 right now. He is doing what they're
QBR.
asking.
What about QBR?
Well, his QBR is in almost 30, so it's below average in that regard. But again,
I love that though. Yeah, I love that.
Well, I mean, it's the one like really random outlier because Aaron Rodgers is under a 50 in QBR right now, and we're not like obviously his track record of being a Super Bowl champion and MVP is different. But I'm just saying, like, yes.
And by the way, the rating versus QBR is a nice way to look at it sometimes too, because by the rating, you don't dismiss it. It's saying he's doing a lot of things well. There's certain metrics you can say he's being successful at. The QBR, which takes into account those key moments in a game, right? When sometimes the scrutiny is higher, that's where he's looking worse. And by the way, I prefer his rating be an 80, but his QBR be a 50 and say like, okay, we're getting closer to that midpoint that we want, as opposed to maybe some fluffy numbers and not enough substance.
Well, the issue is, Adam, when you look at tonight's game against the Dallas Cowboys,
talk to us about it, baby.
This Dallas defense is tremendous. Their offense is obviously taking a step back, losing Amari Cooper. Dalton Schultz won't be there. Dak Prescott is hurt. Ezekiel Elliott looks like a shell of himself. Their offense is going to struggle moving the ball as we get our reinforcements back. But I have a feeling that you're going to see the same type of stat line for Daniel Jones. They're going to say, don't turn the ball over. Help us move the ball down the field. Rely on the running game because guys like Evan Neal are better run blocking than pass blocking someone like Micah Parsons. And complete 70% of your passes, Daniel Jones. Get us just to about 200 yards. Throw a touchdown. Don't turn the ball over. And the Giants can walk away victorious. And, you know, we're all going to have that same feeling walking away being like, well, he didn't lose the game. He didn't win the game. But then the Giants would be one of only 3 teams in the NFL that's still undefeated. To be the Dolphins, the Eagles, and the Giants. And like at some point you'd have to say, this is what they're asking him to do. He is doing it and they're winning football games.
Yeah, and again, I would say let's stay on this matchup here for a while, and we can always have a broader discussion on the back end. I would say that these will continue to fall into team victories. That's what these are going to keep being, and that's fine. But what it also would say to me is, I could tell you that QBX was the starter for the New York Football Giants as they were winning these games. We talk about whether it is Kirk Cousins looking mediocre or average, right? All these average looking quarterbacks. I can make the case of like, right, so average looking quarterback could be accomplishing the same things. And that's when it comes to evaluating this young quarterback, we need to know that it's more than just being that average guy. It needs to be that you're showing you're capable of doing the next phase of it. Show that Jalen Hurts type leap is coming down the pike here as the team and the organization gets better around them. You talked specifically, though, about this main matchup here with the Dallas Cowboys, obviously. Quick little side note over here. Adam B. Some clown. You know it, baby. All right. I love it. Hey, bring the action, buddy. You want to throw a couple bucks down and call me a clown? I can hear you. It tends to come back to kind of the middle of the road here where people feel about Daniel Jones. And I'll hang my hat in this moment on what the stats tell you over the course of his career, not necessarily the way the fan base wants him to be successful, which I fully appreciate, by the way. How does this offense going to be successful then? You mentioned it. We'll worry about attacking this other side of the ball here, where we're going to be very excited that Kayvon Thibodeaux is finally going to make his New York Football Giants debut in the color rush uniforms in a whiteout stadium on primetime Monday Night Football. I think it's a PR move, really. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux stayed away from the field just to really make his debut on the biggest possible stage, looking the best he possibly could. How does this offense succeed against Dallas, though? You have Parsons there. You have Diggs on the back end. Like, there is athleticism and talent on this defensive side of the ball. Do we think that Saquon Barkley is going to be closer to week 1 in terms of results, or week 2? And that's not a knock on Saquon Barkley, because I loved what he did in week number 2. But where do we just think those stat lines are going to look at the end of the game? Are there more explosive opportunities for him in this one, or is it more grind out?
Yeah, so I think you got to look at the stats of what Dallas has done previously. Dallas has gone up against Tom Brady and Joe Burrow so far this year. Tom Brady threw for 215 yards. Joe Burrow threw for 199 yards. So when you think about those two guys are considered two of the top, 7 or 8 quarterbacks in the league, they had struggles being able to move the ball through the air. And the problem was the fact that Micah Parsons and that defensive front just seem to get so much pressure. I think Micah Parsons is winning like 70% of his one-on-one matchups, which is like an obscene number to be able to do. So Daniel Jones isn't going to be able to have time if people like Tom Brady and Joe Burrow aren't able to cut up this secondary or have time to be able to throw. The Giants are going to have to follow the script of what Tampa Bay did in week 1. They ran the football. Leonard Fournette got the ball over 20 times, had over 100 yards rushing, and they were able to effectively ground and pound the Dallas Cowboys into submission. That's really the only way that this is going to work for the Giants. Is the Giants need to have about 25 to 30 rushes in this game. Hold the pass rush off of Micah Parsons and try to just stay in front of the number every time. Because when it gets to 3rd and 8 or 3rd and long, and you can have Micah Parsons one-on-one against Evan Neal, that's going to be a problem for our offense.
Yeah, you look inside of the numbers a little bit here. Dallas Cowboys have given up almost 67% completion percentage. That's good for what? 3, 6, 9, 12th worst in the NFL. So the ability to get those passes off, that usually speaks to what? Keeping it in front of you, not giving up the big plays, because then underneath that, which is like a fun little supplement, is, yes, 67 completion percentage, but only 5.7 yards per attempt, right? So they keep it in front of them. They don't give up the big plays. And they say, if you're going to want to beat us, you're going to have to try to grind it out like Tampa Bay. Obviously, the funny thing is, we talked about at the top there, Cincinnati Bengals have struggled mightily, took playing the Jets to get their first win. Tampa Bay is very much leaning on their run game to start the season, while you have all these injuries to the wide receiver group as well, offensive line in a big rotation kind of process for themselves too. So yeah, I'd like to think that the Giants can come in and follow that script. And to speak to what Daniel Jones has done well so far, hey, hit the high percentage easy looks, right? Get it into the hands of a Sterling Shepard. Get it into the hands of Richie James. Kadarius Toney not going to be a part of this process as he struggled with the hamstring, so you can't rely on him in this one either. I think you start to look at some of your more reliable receivers to this point. And then let's talk about the bigger boys in this wide receiver room, because one of the things that I think when we think about not a lot of passing yards available, and I do want to get back into this rushing attack, but not a lot of necessarily passing yards available. And yet, knowing that when you look to pass, it's going to be quick passes, and also there's going to be potential pressure. So do you think that David Sills is going to be able to fill that role of, we'll always go back to that beautiful preseason back shoulder fade catch, right? Can he do a couple of those when Daniel Jones needs a bailout? And do you think that Kenny Golladay, off of his disgruntled conversation, and I covered that last week, and I thought it was understandable that he's frustrated, kind of results oriented. All indications are he had a fabulous week of practice. Do you think that those bigger receivers, and maybe specifically Kenny Golladay, can just be, hey man, be that valve when the pressure comes and you got to throw one up towards someone? It's usually the guys with height that can go and challenge and make those key plays.
Yeah, Kenny Golladay has to be He has to be involved, Adam. We can't have him getting 2 snaps. It's ridiculous. He needs to be able to go up and win 50-50 balls because of so much pressure that Daniel Jones is going to get against this Dallas front. He's going to have to kind of toss a couple of those up towards Kenny Golladay, and he's going to have to high point the ball and go make a play. Like, we know that Kadarius Toney is doubtful for today. That is a huge offensive weapon. Obviously, when he played Dallas last year, he completely surgically cut them up all over the field with some of his different motions and routes that he was running. He was awesome. He is not going to be there. I look to Kenny Golladay to get more active and more involved. I think you will see him get considerably more snaps. I think it'll be more of a 50-50 in terms of his split with David Sills, as opposed to the pendulum swinging the way that it did. But to me, Adam, it's going to be about Sterling Shepard again. He's the veteran leader that needs to be the security blanket for Daniel Jones. He has to get himself open. He has to get himself over the middle. He's going to be in spots that are vacated by Micah Parsons when he does bring pressure. It is all about Sterling Shepard having, 5, 6, 7 catches and being open and available and moving the ball, systematically for the Giants.
Do you think that how will you think the Cowboys will look at the weapons in the wide receiver group for the New York Football Giants? Will they say, do they look at any one player? And you mentioned Sterling Shepard. It's like he seems like on paper the guy you earmark and say, hey, he still has the speed to get over the top, deep coverage, whatever. But do you anticipate any, well, we got to take away Sterling Shepard, or is it just going to be, hey, we'll play it straight up? Because even though this isn't a dangerous looking room for the Giants, you still look at it and go, okay, but if I see David Sills and Richie James and Sterling Shepard out there, I'll take, quote unquote, my chances with the other two. I'll be embarrassed if I'm the Cowboys and Sterling Shepard does go for 5 or 6 catches and 60, 70 yards on the day. That would be a failing on the defensive side, I would think.
Not for nothing. You and I have not done a great job talking about how well Richie James has played based on the expectations of him going on into
most
the season.
Consistent player, right? Give me 5 balls a game. I can do it for you. Yeah.
He's catching 5 balls a game, Adam, as you just mentioned, and he's gotten over 50 yards in both games. He is that guy, that gadget guy, not having Wan'Dale Robinson out there, not having Kadarius Toney play that many snaps. He is that kind of quick twitch guy that can get open into small spaces.
Sure.
He has been great. And I don't think we should undersell what his role is going to be, knowing that Wan'Dale and Kadarius will not be out there in this game. So I think you're right. You're saying, well, are they going to be scared? What are they going to do? I honestly think if you're Dallas, you basically sell out on the run and say, we're not going to let Saquon Barkley beat us. We're going to make Daniel Jones throw the ball down the field consistently, and we're going to make him do it more than he wants to. We're not getting him in 2nd and 3s where he's allowed to have play action and the whole playbook is open for Daniel Jones. They're going to want to stack the line, get him into 3rd and 8, get him into 2nd and longs, and say, you're going to have to get the ball out faster than what your progression has been so far this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, specifically then on Saquon Barkley. I mean, we could talk about the fact that Matt Breida can catch out of the backfield, that Saquon can be involved in this receiving game too. I think that what I'd love to see, I agree with you about it needs to start the point of attack with the run game, and I want to touch on that specifically. But I like the idea of, because of what you don't have necessarily in your wide receiver room based on where you started, and I said this over on Twitter the other day, remember, in not having Kadarius Toney and not having Wan'Dale Robinson, that's arguably, based on what the preseason looked like, and then throwing Colin Johnson into that mix. I was talking about actually Wan'Dale and Johnson specifically. Those were 2 out of your top 4 receivers on the depth chart. Now you throw in Kadarius Toney. 3 out of your top 4 receivers on paper coming into the season are not available for this offense. You can put Sterling Shepard arguably as being the number 1 now that he's healthy, and you can't put Kenny Golladay in that mix, and you'd probably say David Sills is, your 4th, 5th guy there. So missing the entire middle portion of your receiving core is an issue. I would love to see the New York Football Giants go with that 5 wide receiver set at some point when Saquon Barkley is out there in a receiving role, when you put Kenny Golladay out there, put David Sills out there, put Richie James, put Sterling Shepard, and create real space for some of these receivers to have some success. Try to get deep enough into the depth chart for the defense of the Cowboys that you create real plus matchups in those wide receiver groups. And it's only for the 3 or 4 times that you want to do it. And all you need to do is hit on 1 or 2 of them, change that field position, and get dynamic down there. But I just want to get your thoughts on that before we talk about getting more players involved in this rushing attack.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think they're going to have to manufacture run plays with short, quick passes, as you mentioned before, Adam. The name that keeps popping into my mind, and I know we're kind of circling the wagons here, is knowing that Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be out and Kadarius Toney is going to be out. Is Darius Slayton going to have a role in this game? I think we've seen this constant like musical chairs of who gets snaps, who gets reps, what's going to happen. Do you see, you talk about Richie James being there, Sterling Shepard. We're saying Kenny Golladay and David Sills are going to split time. We haven't mentioned Darius Slayton at all. Do you see him factoring in at all if he's even active in this game?
Yeah, no, it's a good point that you bring up because I just said, this 5 wide receiver set. And I think when you start talking like that, though, you don't talk about David Sills and Kenny Golladay being out there together, right? One of them's on the field, but everything else you want to accomplish, usually when you spread things out like that, is let's get a couple of real verticals with some speed. And that's what Darius Slayton can do. And just to, this is micro macro. Kenny Golladay, listen, you try to light a fire underneath him. You want the best out of him. Hopefully it turns around this season for him because he's not going anywhere. Even if he looks brilliant, no team is coming after that contract. Whereas short-term, long-term, Darius Slayton just showing that he can do some things that can change how the Giants approach maybe improving this team at a key position. I said at the top there, if all of a sudden the Giants are 3-0 and the playoffs are a real possibility, a tangible goal they can have this season, then you start to think about, well, if I can convert Darius Slayton into a late 6th or a 7th round pick, and I can throw that 7th round pick with something else and get a linebacker in here, get player X, get an extra player in the secondary, get another backup offensive line, whatever it may be, another wide receiver that just fits this scheme better. That's something that I think that Joe Schoen and the Giants will want to do. So yeah, and just from a functionality inside this game, Darius Slayton can do something really well. Run at speed, beat the coverage, and get deep. We know that he struggled to catch the ball, but do I think he's worth putting out there for a handful of snaps, maybe somewhere in the first, second quarter of this game to see, hey, if we can get a matchup and you bring one down, it's a huge play for this team. And it would stick with the theme of Daboll, earn it, and you get the opportunity, right? Darius Slayton has basically took the pay cut, reduced it down to a veteran minimum, and he's put his nose to the grindstone. I think that he's trying to work for that opportunity. Maybe he gets the chance here tonight.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball. We've buried the lead a little bit in terms of both Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon.
No, I know. And that's where I want to open it, by the way. It's what we plastered all over the thumbnail for this on YouTube, but I got so swept up in wanting to see this offense be dynamic. But yes, 100%.
Getting that pass rush back is going to be tremendous. Obviously, we don't have our full complement of players. Leonard Williams is not obviously expected to be out there. So getting this pass rush pack is going to be even more important. We thought going into the year that the Cowboys offensive line was going to be dreadful. They were going to have a ton of issues. They've actually been pretty serviceable. The problem has not been the offensive line. Steele at right tackle has been pretty good. Tyler Smith, their rookie, has a 70 Pro Football Focus rating. He's been fine. They're moving Jason Peters to the inside. You have Zach Martin. They're fully competent. I think the challenge that they have is that they have a Ezekiel Elliott problem where he just doesn't have the burst and doesn't have that fall forward, speed to be able to get them in those 2nd and 5s and 3rd and shorts. And that you're going to see a heavy dose of Tony Pollard at some point. But the Cowboys have similar problems to the Giants. They're going to have to run the ball if they want to win with Cooper Rush back there. How do you feel about this defense with no Leonard Williams going up against the Cowboys offense?
Well, recently during this past week, Wink Martindale said that Dexter Lawrence is his favorite defensive player that he has ever coached. He loves everything that he's about. I mean, I was blown away, to use a Seinfeld George Steinbrenner reference, that he spoke about him that highly. And this always speaks to what is hard to see in the moment on a play-to-play basis, what stats don't tell you, why you and I always push back when Leonard Williams first came over from the Jets and everyone was, he's not getting not enough sacks. You said, it's not about that. It's about the opportunities he creates for others. It's about the space he occupies. And Wink Martindale specifically was referencing when Dexter Lawrence pushed up the middle, Baker Mayfield last week against the Panthers, scooted to the outside, and Dexter Lawrence sprinted cross field to force Baker out of bounds after a small gain, etc. It's the mentality and approach that he wants from them. So on the first phase of how do you replace Leonard Williams, the versatility that he offers, being able to move him around, not the same thing. but I thought that the rookie DJ Davidson has been serviceable when he's come onto the field as well. So you do feel like you have some comfortable depth there. But then the next part of it is what I worry about most. I'll go back to week 1. And by the way, Ezekiel at this point of his career is not where Derrick Henry even is at this point of his career. And yet, a guy that is get the ball in his hands, let him be a power running back. And then what's the complement there? Tony Pollard for the Dallas Cowboys, Hilliard for the Tennessee Titans. And he got injured in that game, but he had a handful of catches, got out of the backfield. And what Zeke does do well is what we talk about. He pass protects really well. So Zeke's function early in this game can be about keeping Kayvon Thibodeaux away from Cooper Rush, keeping Azeez Ojulari away from Cooper Rush. So the process becomes, can you get that push up front and up the middle in Cooper Rush's face at times and bring some extra pressure up the gut if you need to, so that all of a sudden Ezekiel Elliott cannot comfortably help out Cooper Rush, right? So create some chaos back there for them. But I'll be fascinated to see how you balance bringing the pressure and then also accounting for a pass catching back out of the backfield here that could be dynamic for them, to say nothing. We haven't got to, right? The wide receiving group and a little guy named CeeDee Lamb, who has quickly grown into that X factor type of receiver in this offense.
Yeah, well, the nice thing is we have our own X factor on defense in Adoree Jackson, who seems to be shutting down.
I don't hate saying I don't hate hearing that, right? I don't hate hearing having shut down players on our team.
Yeah, you got to like what you've seen from Adoree Jackson, him going up against CeeDee Lamb. That's going to be a good matchup for the Giants. We obviously like to have him in press coverage. Adam, what I'm going to be very curious about is we talked about this rotation of wide receivers on our side of the ball, but also look at what the Giants have been doing in the linebacking group, right? You know, Austin Calitro was the first guy up for the middle linebacking position in week 1. And then week 2, they kind of went away from him altogether, and they used quite a few more defensive backs to kind of mask exactly what was going on. I'm curious to see, obviously Tate Crowder's going to be out there, but is Calitro going to get more snaps? Is Micah McFadden going to get more snaps? Or does Wink like what he has with all of these different defensive backs being able to be out all on the field at once?
Yeah, I tend to, though, famous last words when you try to figure out what Wink Martindale's approach is going to be. However, I think, though there's ups and downs here, and we were hearing right there, AJ coming in with a little bit of Xavier McKinney is shut down as well when we're talking about the weapons that we're going to use here. I think that the way that Dane Belton came in there last week, all of a sudden it was like, we don't know the kid and the collarbone, and then boom, he contributes. Ups and downs, right? Hits swings and misses, but did a lot of things really strong for them, including obviously recovering a fumble there early in the game. I think that Wink Martindale is identifying that as being the way that he stays versatile and dynamic on a week-to-week basis, as opposed to, now do I think that McFadden could get more snaps as the season goes along? Of course. But I don't think, like, Calitro is not surging back into the fold here in the same way that Xavier McKinney and Julian Love and Dane Belton, right, and all this cast that you've added in there. What have you added? Some versatility, some speed. And I think Wink Martindale tries to predicate himself on, again, create chaos for the quarterback and then have the quickness, the speed, and the mental acuity to adjust and react to what's happening in front of you. And the best way to do that is to have guys away from the play coming downhill and attacking at it, not necessarily putting some guys like a veteran like Calitro or otherwise in spots where if a linebacker gets stuck down the line of scrimmage, guess what? It's over, right? It's over your head. It's to a tight end. It's to a wide receiver, and you're trying to chase down that play as opposed to always playing downhill.
You know, knowing that Leonard Williams is doubtful and he's not going to play.
First game of his career that he would miss all the way back to high school, for crying out loud.
When I heard that stat, I could not even believe it, Adam. Because he's battled through injuries, and you always think maybe he took a game here or there off. He's been a warrior out there for the Giants and then previously for the Jets, obviously. Jihad Ward is a name that we're going to be talking about come tomorrow, Adam, because he has some big shoes to fill with no Leonard Williams. You know, obviously you have Justin Ellis, but Jihad Ward is going to be a guy that's going to be out there in different spaces. I mean, how do you think the Giants are going to overcome having no Leonard Williams? Do you think it's going to be Ellis? Do you think it's going to be Ward? Is it just going to be by committee? What's your take on what they're going to do on the defensive line?
I think Ward has already established that he can do everything you need him to do, right? And maybe a little bit more than we thought he was capable of. Now, the one thing you don't want to do is get over your skis on a player like that, veteran, experienced in the system, and start saying, well, why can't he, do X and Y? He cannot just be the replacement for Leonard Williams. The one thing I will say is I'll be curious to watch how Kayvon Thibodeaux is being utilized, because he's big enough and he's strong enough where, again, Wink Martindale, we talk about it being a 3-4. Well, maybe it can look a little bit more like a 4-3, right? If you put two bodies in the middle of that line and now you have Thibodeaux and Ward and Azeez, right? Now you can start to think about the way that you shuffle those bodies to still create a difficult front for the Cowboys to deal with. So I think the failing would be to say, how do you replace player X? It'd be like asking, how are the Giants going to replace Kayvon Thibodeaux and Azeez Ojulari in the first 2 weeks? They didn't bother trying, right? They went with a totally different approach that suited the players they had available. It's why Kalitro played in week 1. Fast forward to week 2 and now to week 3, no Leonard Williams. Let's not start looking across the roster and talking about a guy that has a pretty unique, measurable, and skill set. Let's look at who we have and think about how do we impact this game. And so far this season, man, the defense, I'm not breaking headlines here. The defense has shown the ability to adapt and play to the opponent to give this team a chance to win games. That's what they've done consistently so far. And then we catch a break here with no Dak Prescott. You should feel confident being able to put a really solid game plan on that side.
Talking about game plan, Adam, hit me with game script. What do you think is going to happen in this game? Maybe we'll get into some prediction time. Do you have a feeling either way, a gut feeling about what you're expecting to see tonight?
I think, we highlighted it. I do expect the Giants the Giants' identity is the running attack here. It's Saquon Barkley first and foremost. I do, however, think when you go back and watch the tape, week to week here so far, we've seen a little new wrinkle offensively, right? The 3-back set there with having Brightwell. Aha, I knew I'd get there. Having Gary Brightwell available in the backfield, having Matt Breida, right? So some of these new wrinkles are starting to come into the fold here. But as it was reported, they said that Mike Kafka's been calling the plays, but Daboll's in communication with him. And he said, over the first couple of games, every so often I have to give the old reminder, Saquon, more Saquon. Like that is what they're going to go with. So I think they'll use it as a rock solid. But I think, and I hope, for the sake of saying I wanted 3 games to evaluate Daniel Jones, I want to see some of this vertical play here. I want to see a couple of looks where you take some shots, because I think the risk you run after 2 games that you've won so far, we can both go back and say, as I'll take one brief second here on the line to kick out some absolutely disgusting content on the side, and I apologize for that anyone had to see that. The last thing you want to do is fall into this false sense of confidence that what you did in the first 2 weeks is something you can always win with. We're only a missed field goal away, maybe a slightly better quarterback last week away from losing those games. And that wouldn't change how I feel about this team, but you can't be overconfident in being able to go back to that well every single week. You got to get a little more explosive offensively. I think the Giants came dangerously close to having that be a downfall against the Panthers.
It does feel like both the Giants and the Cowboys are going to try to force the opposing quarterback to win the game for them.
Yeah.
Like,
I want that test. I want that test for Daniel Jones.
It is a good test. Look, Cooper Rush is completing just under 60% of his passes. He threw for 235 yards in a win against Cincinnati.
Knows the system.
Yeah, he very familiar with the Giants as well. Has been around the block here. Still has some friends on the team. Daniel Jones needs to play better than Cooper Rush. It's as simple as that, Adam.
That's a really good thing to watch for. Yeah. You are a quarterback looking to be a franchise quarterback. You cannot be outdueled by Cooper Rush, right?
It can't happen. You need to be able to play better. You don't have to have more passing yards. You don't need to necessarily have more touchdowns, but you have to play better. You have to be able to move the ball and control the offense.
That was a good one, though. I know what you mean. You don't have to have more yards. You don't have to have more touchdowns. You don't have to complete a higher percentage, but you need to have a better game. But I know what you mean. And by the way, credit where it's due. Daniel Jones, both weeks, 4th and 1s, naked bootlegs, which, by the way, don't go back to that well too many times because you've put it on tape now back-to-back weeks. But he converted key 4th downs. He was a part of the process of game-winning drives each and every week. So he's been showing that. But to your point, Cooper Rush, and this is the delicate balance I think that the Giants are facing right now offensively. You want to open it up, then Daniel Jones throws an interception. It flips the field. Cooper Rush gets a nice quick touchdown pass to CeeDee Lamb. And all of a sudden, we're sitting here on Monday talking about how, hey, you tried to go toe-to-toe with Cooper Rush and you got burned on it. So I think there's certainly that spectrum that exists when it comes to this game. Let's talk about here, just before we talk about predictions, and you can feel free to drop in, pepper in another little anecdote you got. But where's the line here? Where's the over-under? Let's talk about some of that betting action. Let's get into Andy's bet of the week.
Yeah, so the over-under on the game is 38.5. It's moved down from 39.5. A lot of people are betting the under in this game, and it's understandable. Obviously, backup quarterback for Dallas. The Giants haven't scored more than basically 20 points in any game so far this season. So it does feel like the under is going to be a good bet. Now, when we talk about what bet I like the most, we talked about the guy, we mentioned him earlier. It's all about Richie James for me today.
I like that one. I like that one.
If you wanted to take a stab at it, Adam, what do you think the over-under on Richie James receiving yards is?
34.5.
So it's 32.5.
Oh, okay. I'm getting better, baby. I'm in here now.
I know. Listen, I'm rubbing off on you. I could tell already that you're excited about this wager too, because guess what? No Wan'Dale Robinson, no Kadarius Toney. Richie James has a role in this offense, especially with those two not on the field. We mentioned it before. 5 catches week 1, 5 catches week 2, over 50 yards in both of those games. You expect him to get anywhere from 4 to 6 looks again at this, and we're talking about 32 yards. He's got to be able to hit 30, 35 yards. I think that's very doable. It's my bet of the week. I think that Richie James on those short passes, filling some of the spaces that Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence end up leaving, is going to be exactly what gets Richie James over 32.5 yards.
I like that one a lot. By the way, one of our, we teased this before. It's a rollout, slow and steady rollout here. We have also partnered with a great website in BetStamp. If anyone's not using it, and this is just a great outlet when we're talking about looking at our betting lines, etc. It's basically like the kayak of betting sites where they pull in every single line from all these other betting websites. So you put your money in the best possible place. And the reason why I bring that up is because just overall here. So for example, if you want to get the best available full game, well, you can get the plus 1.5 for Dallas if that's your case on FanDuel. But if you're going with the Giants, the -1 is over on PointsBet. So depending on what you think this game script looks like, you can go ahead and push yourself in one direction or the other. Likewise, Barstool is giving you the best odds at -112 if you're taking the Giants, and then the over/under, like you mentioned, you can get 38.5 as the over on PointsBet, or on WinBet you get the over/under at 39 even. Now, I know the half-point difference, whatever, but the bottom line is it shifts what the payout looks like there for you. So there's some things to play with there. You said, what do you think over/under? What, like 20-17? I mean, that's basically, we're living in that type of, if we're talking the under, that's kind of where you're living. Do you think it's more likely? What is more likely to you, that the Giants offense starts to get itself going a little bit here this week, or that it's controlling the game clock, it's grinding it out, and the Giants kind of know, at least in the short term, what their identity is here, and there's just not going to be enough possessions to have this thing spill over into a 24-21, 27-20?
Yeah, to me, it feels like it's the team that makes the bigger mistake will lose the game. And I think that it's a tough thing to say, be conservative, make sure to be methodical, play to not lose the game on your own, but it really does feel
to not lose the game, as the famous quote goes.
Of course. Speaking of Herm Edwards, who no longer has a job.
You should have had a different mantra. I always said it was a mistake to not play. You should have said play to win the game.
Well, you play to not tie, maybe. I don't know. Whatever. But Adam, the way that I'm looking at this is, it feels like explosive plays are going to be at a premium. It is going to be very difficult. I think both teams are going to try to establish the run. I think whoever ends up having more rushing yards between Ezekiel Elliott and Saquon Barkley will dictate who ends up winning this game, because both teams want to run the football. Saquon is projected 77 rushing yards. Ezekiel Elliott's about 59, depending on where you're looking. So they expect the Giants to be able to run the football. For me, I just don't know. We haven't seen it yet, the Giants be super explosive consistently. So we haven't seen a lot of these big chunk plays. We're missing some of key contributors on the offensive side of the ball in Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney. We don't really know what we're getting yet from the rest of this offensive unit outside of Saquon Barkley. So for me, I'm liking the under in this. And no one likes to bet unders because it's just not fun to root against points. You're like,
An
yes, I just want to
exciting
see a punt.
dynamic
I
back
want to
and
see a
forth
punt.
game.
How many punts can I get? Punts make me very excited, Adam.
Scottish Hammer over under 7 punts in the game. We'll take it.
Exactly. So for me, I look at this being a low scoring game. Whichever team can control the football on the ground will ultimately win. And it feels like it's going to be a one play changes this game, where it's a close game in the fourth quarter. Who makes the big play? Who forces the big turnover? How does that end up happening? That's going to end up dictating who's going to win this game.
How about this one for a same game parlay? I didn't even make this myself, so you can trust that it's actually reasonable. You can get Giants to win, Daniel Jones over a touchdown and a half, which, that could be asking a lot in this one, and Barkley to score a touchdown. Plus 700.
I like that.
You got to ask, listen, you can hit a tight end for a touchdown if you want to. Tanner Hudson can grab a 4-yard little out route at the goal line there, right? It doesn't matter how you get to it, just that you ultimately get to that result. I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate that one myself there. But to your point, the conflict, to go back to the top of the show, the conflict for me is winning games matters a great deal. But the premise of this season was evaluation and growth and fixing the finances for this team. And there's going to be difficult games ahead. We could turn around in week 10 and the Giants could be a 500 team. They could be a 4-6 team at that point. And what I don't want to do is see the Giants sacrifice the evaluation process, specifically when it comes to Daniel Jones, in favor of getting wins that we all want in the moment. We all want to beat the Dallas Cowboys, right? But I don't want to find out another 2 weeks from now after Chicago and after the London game against Green Bay that I still don't know what Daniel Jones is or is not, right? Like at some point I want to see that. So I had set that expectation of give me 3 weeks, which means I need to come in tomorrow morning and tell you something definitive about how I feel about Daniel Jones. And I can get there off of the first 2 games if in tonight's game he comes out and leads the team. And then we talked about, what do you want to see from a game script standpoint? We know Saquon's going to be a massive part of it, but I don't hate the idea of taking a couple of shots early in this one. Daniel Jones, as you've always pointed out time and time again, has been, at least going back to last season, one of the most accurate deep ball throwers in the league. You got to be willing to do that at some point, because I don't want to turn around and see the Giants trailing in this game, which is something also, even though that happened in Tennessee, wasn't the same challenge there. If you get behind early against Dallas, that's when things get uphill here, right? That's when an athletic pressuring defense can start to create some problems for you. So I don't know, man. Last time I picked the Giants to lose a close one last week. Did you give your official prediction here? Where are you going with this one?
So my official prediction
I'm torn, by the way, in case you're wondering.
I have it as a low scoring game. I told you that it's going to be a run first offense. I think the Giants offensive line is much better in run protection than they are in pass protection. And so they're going to want to eliminate the big plays by Micah Parsons by almost running the ball either at him, away from him, or, making sure that Evan Neal is pushing him that way instead of, going back on his heels. I do think that it's going to be one big play. Someone has to make a play. I'm hoping, and I think it's going to be Kayvon Thibodeaux coming off the edge for a strip sack, recover the ball, and the Giants end up winning the game. I'm going with a low score. I see, other people in the chat like Fernando go 17-14. I'm going 16-13 Giants in a low scoring, run the ball defensive game.
Golden boot Graham Gano for the win again. Leading scorer last week, leading scorer once again in this one. I can see that being the case. The one thing that I also want to say is we're getting, we see boxes in there in the conversation. Yes, Kayvon Thibodeaux, Azeez Ojulari set to play tonight. It creates a whole new wrinkle. The one thing that I don't want to do, because you never do this with an offensive lineman, right? Evan Neal, you say, hey, just try to hold your weight in the run game. You're building towards it, whatever. I'm not setting earth-shattering expectations for Kayvon Thibodeaux in his first game back. I think that he will have his moments where he can shine, but I don't want. If he does it, I'll be elated, and that's the expectation for a top pick like he is. But I'm also not going to come out of the game if maybe it's a little bit of a, like a preseason. Some of those reps we were like, it seems like kind of going through the motions, can't quite tell what he's really about here. What is his impact going to be? I think you're going to see him get shot out of a cannon in this one because he wants to make a big impact play. Like you, It's hard for me, it's probably a lot of Giants fans, to believe that they're 2-0 and they could be just one of 3 undefeated teams after tonight and tied for the division lead in the NFC East. If Dak Prescott was playing in this game, I'd be thinking about it differently. I don't think the New York Football Giants can afford to lose the first division game of the year at home against a backup quarterback. You cannot afford to lose it. And unlike years past, I have far more faith in the New York Football Giants coaching staff to see that and to produce the game plan that allows for them to win. I think I'm comfortable with the under here, but I don't hate the idea of the Giants getting a little bit going offensively. I'm going to say New York Football Giants take this one 23-16. So that actually might be the over then, right? You'd be taking the over there.
You're right at the line, Adam. You're right at the
classic.
line. But this
sexy push.
This does feel, Adam,
and that's a difference, by the way, of what a touchdown for me as opposed to a field goal for you.
Yeah, one big play, getting a fourth down or not. Adam, this does feel like this game has all the makings of truly seeing the culture shift of the New York Giants, right? If the Giants used to, back in the 90s, in the old Giants Stadium, everyone took pride in these big games. We hated Dallas. We just wanted to get the win. You know that the fans are going to be rocking. You know that games like last week were ones over the last decade that Giants would end up inexplicably losing. And they ended up winning the game.
By the way, Giants are not good on Monday nights. They're not good in prime time. They're not good against Dallas in prime time. Dallas has won 9 of the last 10 million. There's a lot of things stacked up against them, which almost makes me be more bullish on the Giants because everything that's happened so far this year has been in the face of what has been familiar. It's been moving in the other direction, moving towards a positive outlook for this team.
This feels like a changing of the guard almost for the Giants. If they can come out, play strong, get everybody excited about the brand of football that they're willing to play, beat Dallas, be one of those 3 undefeated teams, I mean, we could all wake up as Giant fans tomorrow very happy knowing that we're pushing towards being a potential playoff team. And guess what, Adam? That would signify that the rebuild is basically already started, already begun, and you got to start thinking, what can this team accomplish this season?
Okay, now I agree with you 100%. Before we get out of here, now here's the problem, King Chris. I'm going to tell you right now. I was about to throw you up here. You said Galladay is going to have 100 yards today. And I was inches away, millimeters. If Andy was a little bit shorter with what he had to say, I was going to say, you see this hat right here? There's one coming your way if Kenny Galladay hits that 100-yard mark in this game. The problem is, though, you followed it right up with Bellinger's going to have a big game today. If I waited another 5 seconds, you might have said, I think Daniel Jones is going to have a big day. And Saquon Barkley. Too many caveats getting thrown out there, King. But we are going to start doing, I think, some things like that. Pre-game shows, when we're having the conversation, if you throw out a bold enough prediction, there could be a banner in your future. There could be a hat. Andy might send you his glasses. They're prescription, but it doesn't mean it won't be nice to have them, right? A little memento of that time that you went bold and helped the Giants get a big win. Friends, the kickoff is 2.5 hours away here, so plenty of time to think about it, to wonder about it. Shout out to, I like that, Johnny. We are awesome, aren't we? And you're welcome, dude. By the way, let's go ahead and use the old moniker that we always like to get to here. At the end of the day, that's what this is about. Like, the Giants have done the job over the first 2 weeks of this season where you can be excited. You can be hyped. You can be thinking about what it means to win these games. And I'll just say, man, it's really important the Giants win this one because otherwise, even though they won the first 2 games, as you pointed out a minute ago, every fan in the world would say, well, I'd give up either one of those, maybe even both of those to get this win against Dallas at home, right? Like, I'd be 1-2. I very close to saying I'd rather be 1-2 beating Dallas at home in color rush uniforms than being 2-1 and knowing that you keep them right in that division conversation with Dak coming down the line here, right? That's why this game is critical too. Win this game, be 3-0, you start to set yourself up for success in the division and thinking about those wild card spots. Never too early to start to have those types of deep down the road thoughts.
At the end of the day, Adam, this is what Giant fans have been hoping for. We want relevant football games. We want to feel competitive. We want to feel like we are in it and we have an opportunity to win. Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka, Wink Martindale And this organization through Joe Shane have delivered that so far through 2 games. And oh, how sweet would it be if the Giants go 3-0 with a division win over the Cowboys to just silence all the haters that talk about how the Giants might be the worst undefeated team ever. Let's just keep winning games. I would love to have people continue to say the Giants are the worst undefeated team that I've seen in quite a while.
And based on the results of tonight's game, you'll hear us tomorrow talking about why it's so critical, why it was so critical, what this result is, as we start to take a little bit of a longer look down the schedule and some of those big matchups that are looming for Big Blue. You follow us. You do it over on YouTube, because we're obviously running these live shows like this. You share it with whoever might be a Giants fan out there lost in the world, just looking for some content. We're here for you. That's all we're waiting for. Come in warm from the cold. You go ahead and you subscribe over on your podcast feeds, wherever you get those needs fulfilled. We'll be back in tomorrow talking about the big epic win for the New York Football Giants and how they are 3-0, just one of the last 3 teams to be undefeated in the league. Just everything. It's all coming down the pike here. We really appreciate every single person being in on the live stream here, man. We continue to love doing these and love the interaction. And as Andy Makowitz would want, nay, and on a pregame show season, you know, Andy, we're doing it live here. We might as well just take a moment. Let's just bring it down for a second. I'm going to reset myself, and then we'll get out the door with class.
I like that. Give it one more try, Adam.
And as Andy Makowitz now in a pregame show more than ever would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.